Jenna Marbles does an impersonation of Nicki Minaj in blackface, canceled. Crystalia allegedly texts underage girls, canceled. J.K. Rowling makes a statement on Twitter about transgender issues, canceled. You, think about what you've done. Canceled. Hey creator, I'm Ian Corzine, your social media lawyer. I want to help you understand the law and I want to protect your artistic freedom. Today we're talking about cancer culture, which has been discussed a lot in the news of late. We're going to talk about what is cancel culture. Are there legalities that you as a creator need to be concerned about? And I also want to give you a preview for where I think cancer culture is going. First, some background. Cancer culture, the term, began to be used in the late 1990s. It referred to TV shows that got canceled, and then eventually it was converted to referring to people that got canceled. That meant that their careers were destroyed, their platform was taken because they had said something, done something, maybe even made a gesture that was against someone's beliefs or society's morals. And as a result, they lost their platform. They lost their ability to speak. They were condemned. It was referred to as group shaming. You know, we've seen a lot of cancer culture in the recent, 10 years or so. And I really wanted to take a deep dive into what cancer culture was. I've done a lot of research on Google. I tried to find some discussions about really what is cancel culture, what are the elements of cancel culture, and whenever I do kind of an investigation, I like to understand the contours of what is the term I'm researching. In this particular case, I really wanted to understand the contours of cancer culture because I think it is a prevalent subject that is going on constantly. Every single day, you open up your iPad or your computer and you see another story about a person who's been canceled. It's almost like a keyword out there that signifies, oh my gosh, this guy or this girl is going to lose their career. So after I did my research for today's video, I was able to identify two different types of canceling. The first one was canceling with outrage. The second type was canceling with malice. Now, both these different types of canceling share these common elements. And the first element is the trigger. The trigger is a statement, an action, some sort of gesture, any type of communication of something that someone finds offensive. So a good example of the trigger could be blackface. Anytime it's mentioned in the news or in social media, that oftentimes is a trigger. If someone has done blackface, then they are someone who's subject to being canceled. Another example is transgender issues. I mentioned that in the beginning of the video with J.K. Rowling. When there's a discussion about transgender issues, it is often an emotional trigger that gives rise to canceling someone. And sometimes the trigger is a combination of things. I was thinking about the recent calling out of Adam Driver. There were people who were protecting him, and there are people who said his career should be canceled. And the reason why they said his career should be canceled was because he served in the military in 2001, and he used the N-word in a movie when he was playing a character. So those are the reasons. So you had people on one side, calling out for his defense, and people on the other side calling out that he should be canceled, his career should be terminated. The second common element is almost a question, and that is public figure versus private citizen. That is the question. In order to be called out, do you have to be a public figure? Can you be a private citizen? I think the answer is actually you can be both. An example might be Louis C.K., who was called out. He is a public figure, and so he was subject, his career has been canceled. Another example is Roseanne Barr, another public figure whose career has been canceled. On the other hand, there's plenty of private citizens that have been called out as representing some portion of the population. I'm thinking about Amy Cooper and this movement to refer to people similar to her as Karens. Private citizen, she was called out, and I guess the information is she lost most of her career as a result of being called out. I'm also thinking about Nicholas Sandmann, the MAGA kid, who was a private citizen. Actually, he was a minor who was called out, and eventually he really had his life destroyed. He actually sued and was able to recover something, but he was a private citizen. So really the second kind of element is a debate between whether or not, you have to be a public figure or a private citizen to be canceled. Now, the third common element to cancel culture is the call out. And there's two different types of callouts that I've been able to identify. The first is where the canceller, the person who's seeking to cancel another person, doesn't fully appreciate the context in which the statement or the action was taken. A good example is the Nicholas Sandmann case, where we learned as a global public later on that what Nicholas was facing in that protest march was a different context than was as led to believe by the media. And another example, might be the Lana Del Rey situation, where she published one post and was trying to make a statement about something on Instagram, but ended up defending herself because of the statement she originally made on a different subject. So those are two examples where the person who's calling someone out, who's canceling the other person, may not understand the context in which the statement or the remark was made. And so it's really, really important that before someone calls someone out, that they really have a full picture, an accurate picture of what was facing the person who's being to be canceled. The second type of call out is where the canceller has a clear picture of what went on, understands the context. That might refer to the George Floyd incident, the Harvey Weinstein incidents, the Shane Dawson violations that he recently have come up and made a video about to apologize. Those are examples where it appears that the person who's seeking to cancel the career of another really understands the context and therefore has the means to be able to express his or her opinion using free speech rights and be able to call out that person because it offends them. Now, the fourth part of canceling someone is the gang up. This always happens, and this is what we see a lot of when we read media. We see other people chiming in, basically saying and condemning a person who's subject to being canceling. What's really interesting about this element is that, way back when, a lot of people, there was still canceling of people. It just was not as quick as it is today with the social media speed. But, there's motives for people who are ganging up. One is they don't like the person. Another is they want to support the movement that the original canceller was supporting by calling out the person subject to being canceled. And then the third component, which is kind of unique, you don't see it much in history, is that a lot of times people who are ganging up on the person who's going to be canceled, they really are doing it for likes. They're doing it for notoriety. We see it all the time. Someone cancels someone else, and that second comment or that early comments about the person being canceled, oftentimes they get more followers, they get more likes, they get more notoriety. So what we're seeing when there's the gang up is not just a person saying, "Gosh, I agree with the canceller," or "Gosh, I agree with the movement that the canceller obviously supports." We're also seeing some people taking advantage of a call out of a cancel culture by trying to jump on and get some notoriety out of it. And the fifth common element for cancel culture is silence. I see two different types of silence out there as a component of cancel culture. On one hand, we have just silence by people who are not willing to get involved in the discussion. Way back when cancer culture really arrived, we saw a lot of that. Someone would call someone else out. There might be a little bit of a gang up, and that most people, maybe people who had evidence about the situation, had inside knowledge about why that person made that statement or did that thing, they would remain silent for fear of being attacked or being canceled themselves. But what's unique about our time right now is we're starting to see people being called out for their silence. I'm seeing it with George Floyd. A lot of public figures refused to make a comment, refused to set forth their opinion, and then they got called out on social media for joining the mainstream, not being woke, not having an opinion, hiding, those kinds of things. So what we're seeing in cancel culture right now in 2020 is two different types. We're seeing lots of silence, no question. And I argue for you that actually is wrong and shouldn't be there. But we're also seeing people forced to take a side. They're forced to say something because their silence is going to be called out too. They're damned if they do and they're damned if they don't. So that's a really interesting component of cancer culture that we're seeing today. And I'm seeing it no matter what different type of canceling takes place. And I say that because I alluded to the two different types of cancer culture as I see it. The first is cancel with outrage. And that is one of those how we started with cancel culture. That is where someone hears something and is offended and speaks up and use their right of free speech to speak up. That is kind of a pure cancer culture. What we're also starting to see is cancer culture with malice, because we've seen so many examples of people being called out and being canceled, losing their lives, their jobs, their careers, that people realize, oh my gosh, if I respond to a trigger word or a trigger issue and I call them out, then I can have some negative impact on their life. And they're doing it purposely. You're seeing it a lot with political candidates where, they do something or something is brought up from their past. Someone calls them out, not necessarily because they have anything against that person, because they have something against the movement that the person who's going to be canceled represents, and they want to stop that movement. So those are the two different types. I see a type where, it's an emotional hurt. They're calling someone out because they're hurt about what they said or what they did. And then we're also seeing people who have malice. They are looking for things, or going into the backgrounds, or doxing people to be able to find bad stuff that they can use to call them out and damage their career or damage their movement. So after I was able to appreciate the contours of cancer culture, what is it? What are its elements? What are we facing in 2020 with cancer culture? I turn to the next question. Is cancer culture legal? Can you call someone out, totally destroy their career, and not be sued? For that, we turn to the law of defamation. Defamation refers to a group of laws that certainly apply in America, but really globally, that says that if you make a false statement that injures someone's career, their livelihood, makes them shunned, then that person can sue you and recover money to compensate for the harm that you caused. The key components of defamation are the false statement and the damages. So the false statement that the defendant made, the person who's being accused of defaming the other person, was it truly false? A lot of times it's a question. It was an opinion. It's unclear whether the statement was false or not. There's more to the issue than just true or false. The other part that's really hard is damages to be proved by the plaintiff. If you lose your job as a result of a false statement made by someone, and so you can prove that now you are making $2,000 a month and you've been out of work for 6 months directly attributable to that false statement, that's easy. But a lot of the time, it's not that clear. There was a harm committed. However, it's hard to monetize. It's hard to calculate the amount of money that you should receive as a result of that harm. Defamation law seeks to have a balance between, one, a free speech right. You should be allowed to speak out about someone. However, you should not be allowed to lie about someone and then cause them substantial harm. So understanding those elements of defamation, you get the answer to the question, is cancer culture legal? And the answer is yes, if the statements made by the canceller are true. If the canceller, the person who's trying to cancel the other person, is making false statements, lies, or maybe portraying the context of what the person to be canceled faced as something different, then that person could be sued for defamation. But in general, there is kind of a desire in our world to be able to let people use their free speech rights to speak out about other people, as long as what they're speaking out is not lies. The greater question to me, and the one that I've had a lot of talks with other creators about, is, okay, cancer culture is legal, but is it ethical? Should you cancel someone? Should you rise up? It could be on social media. It could be in a public square, a public forum. Should you do it? And I think the real question is it really depends on the issue, and it depends upon your position. If you are very much offended by a statement or an action of another person and really want to outlaw the practice of whatever was done or said, then I think you should exercise your free speech rights. But you should not do it lightly, because one of the things that I used in the title of this video is I wanted to let you know that the first time you call someone out, you have to be ready to be called out yourself. Because a lot of times when you call someone out, you're judging their actions. And so you're submitting yourself to the public to be judged yourself. So I think it's a balancing test. On one hand, you certainly, and I strongly believe and will fight for, your right to give public speech, to be able to say what you want, so long as it's not a lie and it doesn't cause damage. But at the same time, you have to understand that when you try to cancel someone, that you are subject to being canceled too. And if you understand that and you take that risk, then you can cancel and you may want to go forward with it. Some situations, you may not want to because the harm, the alleged harm, the thing that's supposed to be offensive is not significant enough to totally destroy someone's life and their career. And these days, as opposed to the days of old, we can cancel careers much easier because social media is so fast. Back in the day, whether it be on a newspaper or whether it be word of mouth, people were canceled, of course, but the consequences weren't so huge. They could move away and no one would know. In our current situation, it's much harder because that information is accessible from around the planet. So I do think the gravity of the harm right now for canceling someone is so substantial that you have to do an ethical analysis before you call someone out. Because one, you have to say, listen, does this action really warrant a complete destruction of someone's life? And then two, am I willing to submit to the same judgment that I put on the statement or action of the person that I want to cancel? You got to go through that analysis before you come out on social media and try to destroy someone's life. And I'm really interested to discuss this more. So if you have any comments on cancel culture, if you think it's good, if you think it's bad, if you think it's somewhere in between, I would love to hear your comments down below. This discussion is ongoing. I want to make more videos about it because I think it's just a unique time period where we face this avid desire to cancel people. It's almost in the headlines every single day. And it's really important to understand, the contours of cancel culture before you engage in it. And while you're thinking about that, I'd also encourage you to think about your right to free speech. Do you have a right to free speech on social media? I did a video that explores this topic, talks about the First Amendment, and whether or not we have the right to speak our minds on social media. If you want to watch that video, you can watch it by clicking right here. As you watch the video, I'm going to be at iancorzine.com to answer any social media law questions that you have.